Brace yourself for one of the most astonishing twists you'll ever encounter. A down-on-his-luck man buys a crumbling old farm for next to nothing, only to discover a hidden gold mine steeped in centuries-old secrets. From suspicious strangers prowling around at midnight to mysterious tunnels that might just hold the key to a groundbreaking medical breakthrough. This story has it all. If you're curious about how he unravels the property's haunting riddles, or whether hidden forces will snatch away his precious find, you won't want to miss a minute of this incredible journey. Stick around until the end to see how every clue, every ally, and every nail-biting encounter come together in an unforgettable finale. And while you're here, please remember to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring more captivating tales like this, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. Leon Knight sat in the front seat of his aging station wagon, the wind howling through the cracked side window as dusk settled over the city. He was transfixed by the glaring reality on his phone's screen. Exactly 728.56 left in his checking account. Every time he refreshed the banking app, he hoped for a miracle, but the number remained stubbornly the same. For a man who once designed upscale boutique hotels and modern condos, the plummet from success to near destitution felt as though it had been both instant and excruciatingly slow. Leon was 38, newly divorced, and teetering on the brink of eviction. Not that his slide into hardship had come out of nowhere. 2 years earlier, Leon had been a sought-after architectural designer in a major Pacific Northwest firm, raking in more money than he'd ever imagined possible during his small-town upbringing. But then the real estate bubble burst, eviscerating the luxury market that had propped up the firm. In what felt like a matter of weeks, the company lost its biggest clients. Projects were canceled and high-paying positions vanished. Leon's was one of the first to go. Then came the divorce from Sarah, his college sweetheart. She filed within a month of his layoff, citing irreconcilable differences. Her timing was impeccable if her goal was to walk away with the lion's share of their dwindling finances. By the time legal fees, mortgage arrears, and final settlement checks were covered, Leon was left with a meager scrap of what had once been a robust nest egg. Calls to potential employers went unanswered. His savings evaporated like water in a desert. Facing the possibility of sleeping on the streets, Leon swallowed his pride and sold whatever possessions still carried value, designer furniture. From his old loft electronics, he no longer had the energy to enjoy, and even some of his rare architectural books. When that trickle of money dried up, he took to living in his car. Nights were spent in 24-hour parking lots or the corners of rest stops, showering at a gym that offered an extended membership plan he had paid for before everything had fallen apart. Now, with winter tightening its icy grip, Leon knew he couldn't keep this routine for much longer. His pride kept him from calling his parents, who had always been skeptical of his big city dreams, or his younger brother, an orthopedic surgeon, who had offered him a loan which Leon had stubbornly refused. He had no illusions left. He was painfully aware that if a miracle didn't happen soon, he might be asking relatives for a couch to crash on something he had vowed never to do. It was at that critical juncture, huddled against the cold in his station wagon, that Leon spotted a flyer wedged beneath his wiper. Cursing under his breath, he snatched it free, fully expecting another parking ticket. Instead, the bold print read, "County property, auction foreclosures, and tax defaults." He scanned the listings with a mixture of desperation and curiosity. Most starting bids were well into the tens of thousands, far beyond his means. But near the bottom was a tiny, unremarkable entry that stunned him. Talbot Farm, 92 acres farmhouse and outbuildings, minimum bid 700 property, sold as is. Major structural issues, no utilities. Leon's mind raced. He had grown up in a remote farming town in eastern Washington, though he'd escaped as soon as he could, vowing never to return to the isolation of rural life. But at this point, a roof, any roof, was more than he could hope for. The very next morning, he drove 2 hours to the county courthouse, heart pounding at the possibility that he might scrape together just enough money to bid a farm. It sounded ludicrous, but he had run out of sensible options. The courthouse's auction room was smaller than Leon expected, cramped with folding chairs, and filled mostly with real estate agents and local investors. They looked at him with disinterest as he took a seat at the back, wearing threadbare jeans and a worn jacket. Unshaven and clearly not part of the usual crowd. A county official at the front, a stout man in a cheap suit, recited property listings from a lectern. Large parcels of land, foreclosed houses, commercial buildings in disrepair. Bidders in pressed shirts tapped away on tablets and laptops. Leon clutched the flyer in his hand, Scanning it one more time to confirm the details about Talbot Farm, 92 acres old farmhouse, no functioning well, rotting barn, rumor of some structural nightmare. His rational mind screamed that this was an insane gamble, but at the same time he couldn't ignore the fact that 700 was almost exactly what he had left to his name. Give or take a few bills he owed. One by one, properties were introduced. Bids soared and gavels fell. Leon's nerves frayed. He tried to discreetly glean how the auction worked. Each successful bidder produced a bank check or credit card, then filled out paperwork on the spot. There was no second chance if he backed out. Finally, the official called out, "Next on the list, Talbot Farm, 92 acres, Hawthorne Glen region." Start bid is 700. A tense silence followed. No one so much as flinched. Then the official repeated 700 for Talbot Farm. Leon's heart thundered. He tentatively raised his hand and called out. 700 murmurs rippled through the room. The official looked around. "Do I hear 800? He asked. Silence. Going once at 700. Going twice. Sold for 700 to the gentleman in the back. Leon felt the blood rush to his ears. He had just purchased a massive piece of land for what most people would spend on groceries in a month. With shaky steps, he approached the clerk to pay. She took his debit card and typed away. Her name tag read Deborah Norton. Deborah looked from the card to Leon, then back to her screen, as if double-checking Mr. Knight. "You're aware that Talbot Farm is, well, let's call it a fixer-upper." Leon laughed nervously. "That's putting it mildly, I'm sure." Deborah lowered her voice. "The last owner. Old man Talbot passed about 15 years back. Locals say he spent his final days digging all over the property, claiming there was treasure hidden beneath the fields. People wrote him off as mentally unwell. The county's been trying to sell this place forever. You might find some surprises out there, structural or otherwise." "It can't be worse than living in my car," Leon replied. Deborah grimaced, handing him a receipt and a rusted key looped on a bent ring. "Good luck," she said. By midday, Leon was on the highway heading toward Hawthorne Glen, the folded map from the county's property listing on the passenger seat. The farmland was about 90 minutes from the courthouse and another 30 from the nearest town. On the drive, he rehearsed how he'd break the news to his mother if he ever mustered the nerve to call. He imagined her voice, "You did what?" Soon traffic thinned and suburban sprawl gave way to rolling hills and small homesteads. Road signs for Hawthorne Glen. Population 2500 appeared like a reluctant welcome. Most of the houses he passed looked modest but kept. Then a smaller sign on the side of a gravel road pointed toward a mailbox, so rusted it barely stood upright. Talbot Farm. When Leon first laid eyes on Talbot Farm, he nearly lost his nerve. The gravel driveway was a minefield of potholes, forcing him to maneuver slowly so as not to risk his car's suspension. Tall grass and brambles choked what had probably been a neat lawn. Decades ago, the house itself, once white, was now gray with peeling paint. Windows were missing panes and the porch sagged. Farther back, a large barn slumped at a precarious angle, looking as if a solid gust of wind might topple it. Still, something about the place stirred a mixture of nostalgia and faint hope. A battered weather vane in the shape of a horse squeaked forlornly atop the barn. Leon parked near a dead oak tree, grabbed his phone for a signal. One, of course, he thought. The key from the county clerk fit the front door, though the lock was so corroded that Leon had to push hard to get it open. The inside was dim cold and smelled of dust and mold. A stale layer of grime coated the floors. Mice droppings flecked the corners. A few pieces of old furniture covered with sheets stood like ghosts in an otherwise barren living room. He wandered into the kitchen, noticing antique appliances with chipped enamel surfaces. A stack of newspapers on a mildewed countertop revealed that the home had been unoccupied for at least 15 years. Passing a narrow hallway, Leon found a dining room hosting an enormous wooden table with more old newspapers and maps scattered across it. One of the newspapers, dated from a decade ago, had a headline about local residents reporting strange lights on Talbot Farm land at night. Leon shrugged tall tales, he figured, but the scattered maps piqued his curiosity. They were hand-drawn, showing property lines underground, markings and scribbled notes about mineral veins. Words like seam extends and rich deposit jumped out. He also found a small leather journal with a cracked spine. Opening it, he scanned paragraphs of cramped handwriting. The sentences mentioned old Spanish explorers, hidden shaft, and grandfather's secrets. Leon snorted at the mention of a treasure shaft. Locals must have made up stories about Old Man Talbot's gold fever. It all seemed like the tragic obsession of someone who had lost touch with reality. A sudden noise from upstairs, a thunk or a thud, startled Leon. His pulse surged. Then he realized it was probably just part of the decrepit house shifting in the wind. Still, a chill traveled up his arms, deciding that the ground floor was enough. Exploring for one day, he carried his duffel bag back to the living room, picked the least offensive couch to sit on, and tried to figure out how to make this place at least marginally livable. He had no illusions. The roof clearly leaked, the plumbing was non-existent, and there was no electricity. But was it better than his car? Potentially yes, at least in the long term. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since morning. He rummaged through his bag for a protein bar. As he bit into the stale chocolate, he vowed to drive into Hawthorne, Glen at first light to pick up supplies. Bottled water, a generator, if he could afford it, some plywood to board up broken windows. Despite the farm's dire state, an unexpected flicker of hope played in Leon's mind. A place this big, if somehow restored, could be a real asset. Maybe it was the architect in him always seeing potential in neglected structures. Yet he knew he was grossly underestimating the work required. Still, as he dozed off on the dusty couch, the wind rattling the broken panes, he thought, at least I own it. That night, Leon's sleep was haunted by the farm's myriad noises. The wind, the creaking timbers, the faint scratching of critters scuttling in the walls. At one point near midnight, he jolted awake, convinced he heard a metallic clank echo from outside. He sat in the dark, heart pounding, but eventually convinced himself it was likely a piece of sheet metal in the barn shifting. He was up before dawn. Despite the morning chill, he wanted to see the property in daylight. Stepping outside, the sun rose over the rolling fields, revealing an almost serene landscape. If one ignored the decay, he saw the barn more clearly. Half its roof had caved inward, and the doors hung at odd angles. Beyond that, swaths of scrub brush marked the fields. Old Man Talbot had apparently tried to farm or dig up. With his gas tank nearly empty and $28.56 left in his wallet, Leon drove into Hawthorne Glen. The main road was a single-lane affair lined with a tiny grocery store, a diner, and a hardware shop that had definitely seen better days. After gassing up just enough to keep moving, he headed to the hardware store to buy basic supplies. Nails, tarps, a small generator that was on clearance, and some cheap but sturdy locks. The clerk, an older woman named Marla, raised an eyebrow when Leon mentioned he'd just moved to the old Talbot place. Heard plenty of stories about that farm, she said in a hushed tone. You be careful out there. Folks say Talbot was off his rocker at the end, and weird things happened on that land. Leon, too tired to entertain local folklore, just nodded politely. He loaded his meager purchases into the station wagon and then splurged on a cup of coffee at the diner across the street. As he sipped the lukewarm brew, a well-dressed man strolled in. Late 40s, crisp suit, polished shoes. He eyed Leon with curiosity before walking up and introducing himself. Good morning, the man said, extending a manicured hand. Thomas Waverly. I represent a group of investors who take an interest in local properties. You wouldn't happen to be the gentleman who purchased Talbot Farm? Are you? Leon blinked. How had this man learned so quickly? I am, he said cautiously, ignoring the handshake. Waverly smiled with an unnerving smoothness. Hawthorne Glen is a small town, Mr. Knight. News travels fast. My associates and I have been curious about that property for a while. We would be willing to offer a substantial sum if you're interested in selling. Leon almost laughed at the absurdity. He had owned the farm for less than 24 hours, and someone was already waving money in front of him. He guessed Waverly was talking tens of thousands, but even that might not have matched the staggering potential cost of rehabilitating the place. A part of him was tempted to cash out, but something about the man's approach set off alarm bells in Leon's mind. It's not for sale, Leon said, sipping the last of his coffee. I just got it. Want to see what I can do with it. Waverly's smile remained intact, but his eyes hardened. Understandable. But do keep my card, he said, sliding it onto the diner countertop. We believe there's more to that land than meets the eye. Back at the farm, Leon spent the day patching broken windows with plywood and setting up the small generator enough to power a single light and maybe a charger for his phone. That afternoon, while hammering a board over a gap in the porch, he felt an odd vibration underfoot. It lasted only a second, like a brief, distant rumble, and then it stopped. He chalked it up to the region's occasional seismic murmurs. Toward evening, curiosity got the better of him. He remembered the mention of digging in Talbot's journal. The property, from what he could see, had random mounds of dirt scattered around possibly old excavation spots. Something had possessed the previous owner to tear up huge sections of land, and not necessarily in any structured manner. Maybe it was just madness, but Leon felt compelled to see what was inside that rickety barn. The barn door groaned as he pulled it open, revealing a dusty interior strewn with rusted farm implements, moldy hay bales, and splintered beams. He clicked on a flashlight. Long shadows danced across the warped planks. The floor felt unstable, so he picked his way carefully around collapsed sections. Towards the center, there was a curious depression in the ground about 10 feet wide, as though someone had dug there and attempted to refill it. Suddenly, that metallic clanking returned, a dull rhythmic echo. Clank, clank, clank. Emanating from beneath the floor, Leon's chest tightened. Could there be an animal trap below? Or had a piece of equipment been left on some ancient setting? He knelt at the depression and began brushing away loose dirt with his hands. The ground felt oddly hollow. Then his finger struck something metal, a big iron ring anchored to a rotted wooden hatch. Heart-pounding, Leon tugged at first gently, then with mounting force. The hatch gave with a shriek of protesting hinges, revealing an inky black void. A strong, damp odor wafted upward, an earthy scent tinged with something metallic. Gripping his flashlight, Leon tested the edges of what seemed to be a ladder descending into the dark. He cursed under his breath, debating whether to venture down. Rational thought urged him to wait until morning, but adrenaline had him inching forward. Carefully, he placed one foot on the first rung. The wood groaned but held. Step by step, he descended, the flashlight clamped in his free hand. At the bottom, about 20 feet down, he landed on the solid, packed dirt. What he saw made him freeze. A narrow tunnel supported by ancient wooden beams, snaking into the darkness. This was no simple storm cellar or root storage. Crude pickaxes, shovels, and rusted mining carts lay scattered as though someone had been actively digging for a long time. The clanking was louder now, echoing from somewhere ahead. Leon's heart thundered in his ears. Was Old Man Talbot actually mining for gold? The thought seemed ridiculous. But then again, he was standing in what appeared to be a fully developed shaft, one that presumably no one else at the auction had cared about or believed existed. He took a trembling step forward, searching with his flashlight. Gleams of something reflective winked back from the tunnel walls. Gold pyrite. Before he could investigate further, the clanking abruptly ceased. A shape loomed ahead, accompanied by the sound of cautious footsteps scraping the loose gravel floor. Leon's flashlight beam landed on a figure moving slowly toward him, a man perhaps in his 70s wearing worn coveralls and a miner's helmet with a dim lamp. His lined face was partially hidden by a graying beard that fell to his chest. He carried an old pickaxe in one hand. For a brief second, Leon feared this was some vagrant, or maybe a dangerous squatter. Then the man spoke in a gravelly tone. "You shouldn't be down here. These tunnels aren't stable." Catching his breath, Leon tried to maintain composure. "I own this place now. Just bought it at auction." He brandished his flashlight to show he wasn't defenseless. "Who are you?" The man seemed to weigh his answer. "Name's Malcolm Barnes. I knew the old owner, Jeremiah Talbot. I've been checking on the property every so often." "How exactly did you get in here?" Leon asked. "Been using an old entrance from the back pasture," Barnes said, pointing vaguely to a tunnel branching off to the side. "It's safer than the main barn hatch, which was about to collapse." "Guess I was right, seeing as you just busted it open." Leon scowled. "This is private property. Technically, you're trespassing." Barnes gave a mirthless chuckle. "Son, I've been trespassing for years with Talbot's blessing. He wanted me to keep the structural supports intact so the entire network wouldn't cave in." He glanced at the rotted timbers. "But it's a losing battle, so you're telling me these tunnels are an extensive mining operation?" Leon asked, shining his flashlight on a shimmering vein in the rock. Was Talbot actually onto something real? Or was he just nuts? Barnes hesitated, then shrugged. People laughed at him. "Sure, but there's gold in these hills." Spanish explorers were rumored to have staked claims here in the 1700s. Talbot swore he found their old shafts and expanded on them. The older man paused, eyeing Leon. "Look, you're in over your head. If you don't maintain these tunnels properly, a collapse could swallow half your property." The notion sent a shiver through Leon. The last thing he needed was more disaster. How do you even maintain something like this? You replace supports, monitor shifts in the earth, keep water out. "Takes money, time, know-how," Barnes said, leaning on his pickaxe. "I'm a retired mining engineer, been working odd jobs for local quarries. Talbot was a friend, asked me to help keep his little secret safe." Leon exhaled slowly, thinking of the real estate suit, Thomas Waverly, who wanted to buy the property. If Waverly knew about these tunnels and the possible gold that might explain the eager bid. And if I want to keep this place from collapsing, I guess I'd need someone like you. Barnes's gaze hardened. I'll help under one condition. You let me continue the geological survey I was doing with Talbot. We were mapping the deeper tunnels, looking for historical evidence and structural anomalies. The gold is important, but so is the history down here. Leon considered the older man's battered helmet and gear. The sincerity etched on his face. I can't pay you. I'm broke, Barnes grunted. Wasn't expecting pay. I just don't want to see all this knowledge buried or destroyed. Let me keep studying, and I'll help you fix that old house of yours, too. I'm handy with carpentry. Relief washed over Leon. He stuck out his hand. Deal. But if you cross me, I can't promise I'll let you keep coming back. Barnes gripped Leon's hand firmly. Son, I've no interest in backstabbing you. We might have bigger enemies to worry about. After that tense underground meeting, Leon and Barnes climbed back up through the barn hatch. Barnes insisted they reinforce it immediately, hammering in fresh boards and layering dirt on top to conceal the entrance. By the time they finished, night had long since fallen and both men were exhausted. Barnes retrieved an ancient pickup he'd parked discreetly in the woods. There's a rundown cabin I keep on the edge of your property, he said. Talbot gave me permission to build it as a field station. I'll catch some sleep there. You should do the same in the farmhouse. Tomorrow we'll talk plans, Leon nodded, watching as the truck's taillights disappeared into the darkness. His mind felt overloaded. The existence of a gold-rich mine beneath his land was both exhilarating and terrifying. If word got out, everyone from corporate speculators to desperate thieves might come knocking. Yet he had no resources to mine it himself. No money for heavy equipment or permits. He tried to sleep on the living room couch again, but ended up pacing. Finally, around midnight, he heard the rumble of a vehicle near the property's entrance. Creeping to a side window, he spotted none other than the black SUV he'd seen in Hawthorne Glen. Waverly's men, Leon guessed, coming to snoop. Two figures shrouded in dark clothing shined flashlights around the barn, the main house, and various patches of ground. Anger flared in Leon, but caution kept him from confronting them outright. Instead, he flipped off his single light and observed from the shadows. After about 20 minutes, the figures returned to the SUV and sped away. Leon spent the rest of the night sitting by the window, heart pounding, wondering if he'd already become a target. The next morning, Barnes reappeared with a makeshift breakfast of canned beans and instant coffee. We have to seal off any extra entrances they might find, he said. Sooner or later, folks like Waverly will bring in professional survey teams. Leon took a bitter sip of instant coffee. So your plan is to hide everything. What about the gold? Doesn't that represent a fortune? One that could change both our lives. Barnes frowned. Sure, if you can extract it without the big boys finding out, but you'd need legal mineral rights, specialized gear, environmental permits. The moment you file any paperwork, large-scale investors swarm. If you try to mine illegally, you risk shutting everything down for good. This place is delicate. Before Leon could respond, a county sheriff's cruiser pulled up to the front porch. A tall, broad-shouldered man in uniform stepped out, scanning the property with a critical gaze. Morning, he greeted. Noticing Barnes Sheriff Avery Ross, just checking on complaints about trespassers last night, Leon recounted the suspicious SUV. Ross jotted notes in a small pad. We've had rumors of unknown surveyors creeping around, possibly from a resource development firm. He looked from Leon to Barnes. You two be careful, Hawthorne. Glen is small, but it's not immune to bigger corporate interests. Barnes and Leon exchanged knowing glances. Ross seemed honest enough, but there was no telling how deep any local alliances might run. The sheriff's parting words were cryptic. Old Jeremiah Talbot was a friend. If there's anything out here worth hiding, you might want to keep it quiet until you're ready to defend it. With that, he left. Defend it, Leon muttered. Once the cruiser was gone, hard to defend a secret that half the county seems to suspect. Barnes clapped him on the shoulder. All the more reason to fix your house, fix these tunnels, and keep quiet until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Over the next 2 weeks, a sort of routine took shape. During the day, Leon and Barnes worked tirelessly on the farmhouse, patching holes in the roof, fixing support beams, and doing rudimentary repairs to the plumbing. Barnes had enough skill and resourcefulness to build a makeshift water system using a second-hand pump for the old well. It produced murky water at first, but after some basic filtration, it was usable for non-drinking needs. When not tending to the house, they fortified key points in the tunnels, using salvaged lumber. They shored up sagging beams and collapsed side passages. They discovered side chambers containing old mining equipment, Spanish markings, and even remnants of what might have been a hidden living quarters. Barnes grew particularly excited upon finding a faded map dated 1883, scribbled with notes about Spanish excavation. For Leon, these subterranean discoveries were mesmerizing. He felt more like an archaeologist than an architectural designer. Bits of gold glistened in places, making him question just how much wealth might be stashed in the bowels of this farm. But they weren't alone in their explorations for long. One afternoon, as Leon was hammering a piece of plywood over a broken window, a dusty sedan pulled up. A young woman in her mid-20s stepped out, her dark hair in a ponytail, wearing jeans and boots that looked well-worn from fieldwork. She approached with a folder clutched under one arm, eyes scanning the farmhouse. "Can I help you?" Leon called from the porch. "I'm looking for Leon Knight," she replied. "I'm Sophia Talbot." Leon's heart lurched at the mention of Talbot. "I'm Leon." "Did you say Talbot?" She nodded, offering a polite yet tense smile. "Jeremiah Talbot was my grandfather. The county never listed me as his heir because of some complicated family estrangement. He and my mother had a falling out. I've been trying to reacquire this property for years." She held up the folder. "Official documents, partial genealogies, the works. I didn't know it went up for auction until it was too late." Barnes, who had been crouched by the well, stood up and stared. Eyes narrowed. "Sophia," he said softly, as though recognizing her features. "You were just a kid when I saw you last." She nodded curtly. "Malcolm Barnes, right? You were grandfather's research partner." Turning back to Leon, she exhaled. "Look, I'm not here to fight you. The county has made it clear that you're the legal owner now, but my grandfather spent decades working to keep this place out of corporate hands. I assume you found the tunnels." Leon blinked at her directness. "Yes," he said. "And I gather you know there's potentially a lot of gold in them." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not just the gold. If you've gone deep enough, you might have discovered the underground spring with unusual mineral content. My grandfather believed it had scientific and even medicinal significance. That's one reason he kept it secret. He didn't want big companies turning this land into an environmental disaster." Barnes nodded, stepping closer. "Jeremiah never shared details on that spring with me, but he hinted it was more valuable than the gold, and more dangerous if exploited recklessly." Sophia looked at Leon with earnest intensity. "I've been researching Spanish-era mining sites for my doctoral thesis in geology. This farm is crucial to my work, and I believe we can protect it together if you're willing to hear me out." After an uneasy start, Leon invited Sophia inside. She walked through the dusty, half-renovated rooms with a mix of fascination and sadness. "I spent one summer here as a child. Everything feels both familiar and strange," she said, running her hand along the banister. They spread out her documents and Jeremiah Talbot's old maps on the large dining table. Barnes lingered nearby, occasionally interjecting clarifications about the tunnel layout. The more they pieced together, the more extraordinary the story became. The Spanish explorers, it seemed, had stumbled upon a rare underground spring, deep beneath what was now Talbot Farm, discovering mineral-rich waters rumored to have healing properties. They mined gold from the surrounding rock, but also tried to harness the spring in secret. Sophia's folder contained letters from Jeremiah to her mother, describing how he'd uncovered the Spanish tunnels. He wrote that the water had remarkable regenerative qualities, she explained. He was convinced it could accelerate healing if studied properly, but he didn't trust any corporate entity not to exploit it. Leon's mind spun. If this was true, the farm was sitting on a potentially priceless resource. "So your grandfather left it hidden, presumably to protect it," he said. Sophia nodded. "Exactly. He also wrote about contingencies, fail-safes in case unscrupulous parties tried to seize the land." "Malcolm, did he ever mention sabotage mechanisms in the tunnels?" Barnes scratched his beard. "He was cryptic, but yes. I recall him talking about structural weak points that could be triggered to collapse certain segments, sealing off the deeper chambers. He wanted me to build in more reinforcements, but sometimes I wondered if he was double layering them to create a more controlled failure if needed." Leon felt a knot of apprehension. One wrong move underground could trigger a catastrophic collapse, burying not just the gold but any chance of exploring the spring. And if Waverly or others pushed too hard, who knew what might be unleashed? The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Avery Ross. He stepped into the living room, cautiously tipping his hat. "Got word. A group of men in suits was poking around the western boundary of your property near the creek." "Figured you would want to know," Sophia cursed under her breath. "That must be Waverly or some other resource firm. The creek is fed by that underground water system, which means they could be taking samples." Ross eyed the clutter of maps and notes. I don't need to know all the details, but I suspect you have something valuable here besides a decaying farmhouse. Leon nodded, grateful the sheriff didn't pry further. Ross continued, I can't legally keep them out if they claim they're on public land near the water, but I can slow them down paperwork, checks verifying permits. Still, you should have a long-term plan. Once Ross departed, the three of them huddled in an impromptu war council. They agreed that the farm needed to be secured. If there's a way to prove that this water is significant to historical or cultural studies, it might earn federal or state protection. Sophia suggested, that would keep corporations from simply marching in. Barnes frowned, but that also attracts attention, and if the gold is documented, the property's value skyrockets, potentially drawing bigger fish. Leon folded his arms. There's another angle. If the water truly has medicinal properties, we might partner with a legitimate research institution. Keep it controlled, but also let the science come to light. Sophia's eyes glowed with possibility. That's what my grandfather wanted, responsible stewardship, but we have to be careful. Their makeshift alliance was tested sooner than they expected. 2 nights later, Leon woke to a jarring rumble beneath the farmhouse. Doors rattled and a dull roar shook the ground. Fear clutched him, imagining a full-scale collapse of the tunnels. Leaping from his sleeping bag, he still didn't have a bed. He sprinted outside. The barn was illuminated by moonlight, revealing a fresh sinkhole that had formed near its foundation. Part of the barn's structure tilted precariously into the hole, and dust billowed in clouds. Sophia, who had been staying in a guest bedroom upstairs, scrambled out behind him, followed by Barnes racing over from his cabin with a lantern. They peered into the sinkhole's gaping maw, seeing twisted timbers and half-buried mining tracks. Looks like a collapse in one of the upper tunnels. Barnes muttered, shining his flashlight downward. The faint glint of metal rails was visible. Sophia's face was pale. We didn't do any reinforcement here yet. Could this be sabotage? Leon's mind flashed to the conversation about sabotage mechanisms Jeremiah had built. Had someone triggered one of those fail-safes, or had the old supports simply given out before they could speculate further? Headlights swept across the yard. 2 SUVs pulled up, one black, one silver. Out stepped Waverly from the black vehicle, along with a couple of men in suits. From the silver SUV emerged a refined-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair and a tight bun. She wore practical hiking boots beneath dress slacks. Mr. Knight, Waverly called, feigning concern. We were in the vicinity when we heard a disturbance. Is everyone safe? Leon glared. We're fine. The older woman stepped forward, offering a faint smile. Dr. Teresa Morgan, geological consultant. I've been studying the local area for some time. This collapse is quite concerning. Sophia spoke up, voice thick with suspicion. Studying the local area on behalf of Meridian Resource Group, by any chance? Morgan's eyes flicked to Waverly. My consulting work is broad, but yes, Meridian is one of my clients. The tension in the air crackled. Barnes approached with his lantern, shining it in the sinkhole. No one is going in there tonight, he said tersely. It's too unstable. Waverly clasped his hands, attempting a disarming smile. With all due respect, we might have the resources to stabilize it quickly. We'd be willing to assist Mr. Knight if you'll let us. Our safety crews are on standby. Leon recognized the ploy. Get inside, see for themselves, claim they're saving the day, and then stake a claim. No, thank you, he said, forcing politeness through clenched teeth. I'll handle repairs on my property. Waverly's smile faltered. Time is of the essence. Another collapse might endanger your home. Sheriff Ross's cruiser rumbled up just then, providing timely backup. He stepped out, hand resting near his holster. Evening, he called, sizing up the group. Everything under control here. Leon glanced at Ross. For now, we're just about to assess the damage in daylight. Waverly cleared his throat, stepping away with Ross, presumably to whisper some argument or official line. Meanwhile, Dr. Morgan surveyed the scene, her gaze keen. I truly hope you'll let me help, she said quietly to Leon and Sophia. It's not just about gold. There are remarkable minerals in this land that shouldn't be wasted in a collapse. Sophia stiffened. You mean the mineral spring? Morgan's eyes flickered with interest. You know about that, do you? She offered a conciliatory smile. I've spent years collecting water samples from the region. I'm not here to exploit it. If anything, I'm trying to protect it from reckless extraction. Caldwell, excuse me. Mr. Waverly and his associates don't fully grasp its scientific importance. They only see dollar signs. Leon was torn, uncertain whether to trust her. Barnes muttered, We'll see about that. The following day was a whirlwind of triage. Ross cordoned off the sinkhole with yellow tape, telling any curious onlookers that it was a private property incident. Barnes rigged a pulley system with cables to shore up parts of the barn that were in immediate danger of collapsing further. Sophia carefully documented the damage, snapping photos and taking notes for future reference. Leon spent hours hauling debris from the barn interior. They discovered that the wooden supports in that section of the tunnel had been tampered with. Saw marks were evident on certain beams, suggesting someone had weakened them intentionally. Whether it was Waverly Morgan or an unknown party remained unclear. Amid the chaos, a county safety inspector arrived, alerted by calls from concerned citizens. He turned out to be surprisingly sympathetic once Ross vouched for Leon. After surveying the damage, the inspector declared the barn unsafe for entry, but left the matter of stabilizing it up to Leon's discretion, provided no one else was put at risk. As evening fell, Leon found himself alone in the half-gutted kitchen, leaning against the counter. A dull ache pulsated at his temples, with so many threats closing in. Corporations, sabotage, the unknown forces behind Old Man Talbot's fail-safes. He felt overwhelmed. Sophia entered quietly, sipping from a cup of tea. Barnes is double-checking the tunnel entrances to see if anything else has been tampered with, she said. Sheriff Ross is canvassing the area to see if anyone spotted suspicious activity. Leon gave a tired nod. He noticed how the tension of the past days had worn on Sophia. Her eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but beneath that weariness was a steely resolve not so different from her grandfather's grit he imagined. "We need a real plan," she said softly. "We can't keep patching holes and reacting to crises. If Grandpa built sabotage mechanisms, they could be triggered again. We need to find a way to protect the spring document, it properly, and keep Waverly's company from bulldozing in." He agreed, though the exact strategy still eluded him. "I've been considering the legal route. If we can prove the farm has major historical or cultural significance, the state might classify it as a heritage site, blocking any corporate mining." Sophia set her tea down. "That's a possibility. My university connections could help, but it also means the site gets swarmed by archaeologists, historians, and journalists. The secret of the spring would go public." Leon shrugged. "Is that necessarily a bad thing? The more eyes on it, the harder it would be for corporations to stealthily exploit it." She sighed. "True, but the spring could be compromised by large-scale intrusion. It's delicate. If it's real medicinal potential, you'd need a carefully controlled study." The conversation circled around the same conundrum. Finally, Barnes returned, wiping sweat from his brow. "No more obvious tampering, but we have no guarantee they won't strike again. We need a watch schedule or better security." Leon thought of the meager funds left in his bank account. "Security costs money, which I don't have." Barnes rested a hand on his shoulder. "Kid, you might have more resources than you realize. The question is whether you'll utilize them responsibly or let others do it for you." A day later, just as they were hashing out potential security measures, Dr. Teresa Morgan arrived unexpectedly. She drove alone in a weathered sedan, absent of corporate logos or associates. Leon was wary as she knocked on the farmhouse door, but he allowed her inside at Sophia's urging. Morgan spoke candidly. "My relationship with Meridian is complicated." She began, sitting at the once dusty dining table. "I'm a geologist who spent years studying unique mineral spring. Jeremiah Talbot invited me to test samples decades ago under strict secrecy. My data convinced me that this spring has extraordinary properties, including possible applications in regenerative medicine." Sophia eyed her skeptically. "So why work with Waverly?" Morgan exhaled. "Funding scientific research on this scale doesn't come cheap. I thought if Meridian secured the land, I could guide them to handle it responsibly. But I realize now they're more concerned with gold extraction. They plan to monetize the water as a secondary resource, ignoring sustainable methods. Once they break ground, the spring's ecosystem will be devastated." Leon tried to read her face. She appeared genuinely troubled. "And you're telling us this because there's still a chance to save the site," she said firmly. "If you partner with an established research institution, perhaps the university Sophia is tied to, you could secure grants for a controlled study. The state or federal government might step in to protect it as a valuable scientific asset rather than letting a private corporation turn it into another environmental casualty." Barnes leaned forward. "But that's essentially outing the secret, same as if we declared it a heritage site. Won't that just bring a different kind of frenzy?" Morgan's gaze swept across the group. "I can't promise a perfect outcome. Scientific discovery is a double-edged sword. But it's better than letting Meridian bulldoze their way in. Sophia tapped the table, her eyes reflecting the swirl of her thoughts. If we do this, how do we deal with the gold? Research grants won't necessarily let Leon profit from the mine, but it's his property. Leon answered slowly. Profit isn't my first priority anymore. I won't deny that part of me wants financial security, but not at the cost of destroying something with true healing potential. He looked to Morgan. If we team up with you, can you guarantee Meridian won't muscle in? Morgan shook her head. No guarantees. But if a federal research body or major university is involved, it becomes much harder for Meridian to bypass regulations. It would be an uphill legal battle for them to claim full mining rights. Before they could delve deeper, a frantic knock came at the door. A breathless local rancher, eyes wide with panic, said, "Sheriff Ross sent me. There's a major sinkhole opening on the county road blocking traffic. Folks say it might be connected to the mine shafts beneath the farmland." They all piled into vehicles and raced to the scene. The road, which cut along the northern boundary of Leon's property, had caved in, revealing a cavernous section of tunnel. Below, chunks of asphalt dangled precariously. Emergency vehicles surrounded the area, and Sheriff Ross directed traffic. Ross spotted them and called out, "The tunnel system extends way beyond your barn. It's undermined the road. We have to close off the entire route." Leon swallowed hard, realizing this was likely one of Old Man Talbot's sabotage lines, or maybe just the consequence of neglected infrastructure. Either way, it was another blow to the farm's secrecy and safety. Morgan surveyed the scene grimly. "You see now why we need real resources. More collapses like this, and the state will condemn the entire area. Meridian will swoop in with proposals for rescue operations." Leon stared at the yawning hole in the road. "So we make our move. We alert the right authorities, spin it as a medical research gold mine, not a literal gold mine. Let them see this place is too valuable to be left to corporate greed." That was the turning point. Within days, Sheriff Ross, Dr. Morgan, Sophia Barnes, and Leon formed a core team. They agreed to approach a reputable research university with environmental and medical departments, well known for ethical oversight. Sophia's academic ties helped secure a preliminary meeting. Morgan contributed her existing data on the water's unique properties, including some partial cellular studies that suggested accelerated healing. Of course, word spread fast that something big was happening at Talbot Farm. Waverly publicly threatened legal action, calling the sinkholes a hazard caused by mismanagement. But behind the scenes, he sent Leon repeated offers, each larger than the last, to buy out the property. Leon refused. As the research proposal solidified, the team braced for confrontation. They expected Waverly to file lawsuits or attempt to discredit Dr. Morgan. Instead, he showed up on the farmhouse porch with a cadre of corporate lawyers and a local camera crew. Under the glare of news cameras, Waverly posed as a concerned citizen, wanting to prevent environmental disasters and implying Leon's negligence had endangered the county. Leon managed to keep his composure. He acknowledged the collapses were serious, but pointed to the deeper issue. There's a historically significant tunnel network underneath this land and a rare mineral spring with potential medical benefits. My team and I are working with experts to ensure it's preserved, not destroyed. That segment aired on the regional news, sparking public interest. Some locals began to champion Leon, praising him for trying to protect a scientific wonder. Others worried about property values or the safety of the roads. The county commissioner scheduled an emergency hearing to discuss the situation. Meanwhile, the university's research board fast-tracked their investigation. Several professors arrived to collect water samples and evaluate the tunnel's stability. They were stunned by the evidence, though they kept it guarded. For the moment, everything hinged on whether they could secure a federal grant to manage the site. One afternoon, Sheriff Ross informed them that Waverly's company, operating under a new name, had filed an injunction claiming the land was historically private property before it passed to Jeremiah Talbot, thus mudding the chain of title. "It's a legal ploy," Ross said, "aimed at dragging you into court until you can't afford to fight. And let's be honest, you don't have the money to wage a long legal battle." Faced with that grim prospect, Leon and Sophia pored over Jeremiah's old letters. They found references to a deed that predated modern times, connecting the land's earliest usage to indigenous communities. If part of this land was historically tied to a tribe, we might be able to invoke protections. Sophia said Barnes was skeptical. Jeremiah never mentioned tribal ties, just Spanish explorers, but maybe he left something out. Dr. Morgan took a different angle. Even if indigenous rights aren't straightforward, the fact that a unique medicinal resource exists might prompt the federal government to designate this area as environmentally critical. She flipped through her notes. We have the data to demonstrate the spring's uniqueness. We just need a big enough stage. As the county hearing neared, tension soared. Would the farm be labeled a dangerous site, forcibly condemned, or recognized for its historical and scientific importance? Leon could hardly eat or sleep, the stress gnawing at his gut. Every step felt like a gamble in an arena of corporate sharks and governmental red tape. The morning of the county commissioner's emergency hearing brought a thunderous downpour that turned Hawthorne Glen's streets into rivulets. Leon, Sophia Barnes, Dr. Morgan, and Sheriff Ross crammed into a pickup to drive the half hour to the county seat. Together they carried boxes of documents, water samples, and historical maps, evidence they hoped would safeguard Talbot Farm. Inside the cramped hearing room, local residents, curious onlookers, and a few out-of-town reporters had gathered. Commissioner Brian Yates, a balding man with a stern expression, banged his gavel to commence. Waverly and his legal team sat on one side, leaning back in polished suits. Leon and his group took the other, each radiating nervous resolve. For the first hour, Waverly's lawyers hammered away at the property's alleged hazards, showing photos of the sinkholes, the barn collapse, and the road damage. They argued that the tunnels were an unmaintained threat to the entire county. Waverly then rose to propose that Meridian Resource Group, with its extensive experience and capital, should handle remediation. We'll assess and secure the tunnels, ensuring public safety, he declared. And of course, any minerals we find in the process remain property of the rightful owner. Our firm, upon purchasing from Mr. Knight at a fair price, Commissioner Yates turned to Leon. Mr. Knight, the evidence is clear that your property has become a danger. If you won't sell or allow corporate oversight, what do you propose? Leon's mouth felt dry as he approached the microphone, but he steadied himself, recalling all that was at stake. Commissioner, the Talbot farm tunnels aren't just random holes in the ground. They hold significant historical, cultural, and scientific importance. We have documented proof, including maps dating back to Spanish expeditions in the 1700s, old diaries from Jeremiah Talbot, and modern geological studies that show there's a unique mineral spring beneath the land. We're partnering with a major research university whose representatives are here to speak to the medical potential of this discovery. Dr. Morgan, and a university professor, then presented their findings, albeit in cautious language, to avoid hype. They discussed preliminary lab work, showing unusual mineral compositions that could accelerate cell regeneration in test samples. The commissioner's eyes widened and the crowd murmured. What about the immediate safety risk? Yates pressed. Barnes stepped up, identifying himself as a retired mining engineer. Yes, the tunnels pose risks, but with proper support, structures, sealing of certain sections, and controlled excavation, we can stabilize them. Selling to a corporation solely interested in gold extraction could lead to rushed methods that cause catastrophic cave-ins. Waverly tried to object, but the commissioner permitted Barnes to continue. Moreover, these defenses, sinkholes, sabotage lines, were partly left behind by Jeremiah Talbot to prevent unscrupulous exploitation. They can be systematically dismantled. After hours of testimony, the commissioner recessed to deliberate. By late afternoon, he returned with a provisional ruling. The county would grant Leon a limited grace period to stabilize the property, partnering with the university's research team. However, an independent oversight committee, part county officials, part state representatives, would monitor the progress. Meridian's request to purchase in mind was tabled, pending further environmental and historical assessments. In effect, Leon and his allies had won a stay of execution. Waverly left scowling, but he wasn't done fighting. No one doubted he'd try again. Over the next months, a careful transformation took place. Under the guidance of Dr. Morgan and the university, new beams and structural supports were installed in the main tunnels. The sabotage lines were neutralized. The deeper spring chamber was sealed off except to credentialed scientists and tribal representatives. Yes, tribal for it emerged during thorough research that the local indigenous group, the Wenatchee Band, had ancestral connections to the spring area dating back centuries. They were brought in to consult on any further excavation, forging a partnership that gave them partial oversight and ensured the site's cultural respect. Early results from the research were promising. Animal studies hinted at remarkable healing rates. Plans for limited human clinical trials were drafted with the Wenatchee Band's input to maintain ethical usage of the water. Sophia spearheaded the historical side, mapping the full extent of the Spanish tunnels and cataloging artifacts that corroborated centuries-old accounts. Barnes acted as site manager, balancing modern engineering solutions with preserving the heritage. Sheriff Ross, promoted to a broader county safety role, ensured that attempts at sabotage or unauthorized entry were swiftly dealt with. A year later, the property looked radically different. The farmhouse was renovated into a modest administrative hub with updated plumbing and solar panels for energy. Temporary research structures dotted the once overgrown fields, carefully placed to minimize environmental disruption. The barn, partly collapsed, had been rebuilt as a historical exhibit, showcasing old mining equipment found in the tunnels. Tours were by invitation only. No open tourism, just enough to maintain transparency for the oversight committee and foster public goodwill. Leon Knight stood on the farmhouse porch one bright morning, gazing over Talbot Farm, which was no longer the neglected eyesore it had been. He felt a surge of contentment tinged with disbelief. His once desperate purchase for $700 had blossomed into something far more meaningful than mere wealth. He might never be a millionaire from the gold veins, but he now had a purpose and a new kind of security, one rooted in collaboration, scientific discovery, and respect for the land's hidden gifts. Beside him, Sophia Talbot, who had dropped her last name's secrecy and embraced her grandfather's legacy, smiled at a text indicating that the latest water sample results looked promising. Morgan was excitedly preparing for a keynote presentation at a medical conference, drawing attention from major universities. Even the state government, once wary, had begun praising Talbot Farm as a model of responsible stewardship, bridging historical preservation with cutting-edge science. I wonder if Jeremiah ever imagined all this, Leon mused, picturing the old man's fervent, digging his cryptic journals and the centuries of secrets that led to this outcome. Sophia took Leon's hand, maybe not in every detail, but he knew the spring was meant to heal, not just enrich. If he's watching now, I think he'd be proud. He squeezed her hand, letting the weight of the moment settle. There was no telling where further research would lead or how fiercely Waverly might still fight to wrest control. But for now, the ground under Leon's feet felt solid. The hidden gold mine had, in the end, revealed treasures beyond gold, purpose, community, and a chance to make a difference in ways he had never imagined when he was just another down-on-his-luck architect sleeping in a station wagon. They heard Barnes's voice from the barn, calling for help with a new batch of supplies. Leon and Sophia exchanged a warm glance. Then they descended the porch steps side by side, prepared to continue building what Talbot Farm had become, a sanctuary of history, healing, and hope for everyone who approached with genuine respect for the secrets the land had guarded for centuries. Reflecting on this whirlwind journey, I can't help but marvel at how a single decision changed everything, from the bleakest moments of financial ruin to a life defined by purpose, hope, and genuine collaboration. The old farm and its hidden gold mine turned out to be more than a mere jackpot. They became a testament to the power of teamwork, respect for history, and the discovery of something far greater than money. In the end, it wasn't the glimmer of gold that truly mattered. It was how those hidden veins brought people together to create solutions, protect natural treasures, and ignite groundbreaking research. I'd love to hear what you think. Did any twist surprise you, or do you have your own theories about what might happen next? Feel free to comment below with your opinions and insights. Let's keep the conversation going. And if this story resonated with you, remember to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future narratives. Thank you for being part of this adventure.